Okay, it's time for the top 10 episodes of My Little Pony Season 6. Yeah, more like top 4. Okay, no, I am going to try to rein in the cynicism here. This is supposed to be about why I genuinely liked these 10 episodes, which I did. But, well, I'll sum it up after the intro. Now, thanks to a late rally from the end of Season 6, there were enough episodes that stood out to me as legitimately good to fill up a top 10 list. And that's taking into account that almost none of them are really bad. I mean, if I did a 10 worst list, I'd be talking about episodes I didn't even hate after the first 2, and episodes I straight up liked overall after the first 6 or so. But nonetheless, the fix I'm used to getting from this show was a lot more diluted this season. I think even its staunchest defenders would admit there were far fewer episodes that felt like great key moments for the main cast this time around. Not nearly as often did it feel like we were really bonding with any of them in adventures or in little slices of life. And their ability to do that was kind of the key to this show's success. I mean, when your cast of girl ponies and a dragon is so relatable that even a mild skeptic like me, who has a limit on touchy-feeliness for its own sake, does feel for them, that's something special. I don't know, maybe the movie limited what Season 6 was allowed to do with them even more than we realized, but the newbie writing team and their visions make me wonder. As is, we had a lot of episodes with characters besides them in the spotlight, and instead the fan favorites often seem to be the ones that stuck to a formula where they were concerned. A new character comes along who needs someone special to understand them and find the key to making their life happier, and then one of our main characters gets to provide. So it's a feel-good ending, because our lovable newbie gets what they wanted just as good if not better than they hoped, and our main character, who we view the story through, gets lots of gratitude and praise for being awesome. But even those weren't really anything special to me, since they seemed to have all their chips on that feel-good part. They didn't always care if the lessons themselves came across as generic or hokey, or even if the path from A to B was half-baked and not entirely clear. Of all the episodes to follow that approach, the best written was probably Flutterbrudder. It had a realistic conflict, it clearly defined what the character's problem was and what he needed to get over it, and it didn't cop out on any part of his pathway there. But notice that that one didn't become much of a fan favorite, because the character in question, Fluttershy's brother Zephyr, wasn't very lovable. Fans didn't get behind discovering what he needed as much because getting him there didn't always feel very good. It could be messy, difficult, and even confrontational, just like such a thing probably would be. Don't get me wrong, I agree that he was a problem. That time set aside just to show us how obnoxious he was really didn't help anything, which is why that episode won't be making the list either. I'm just saying that if I can only have one, I'll take the well-written story over the character that wants to give me a hug. So yeah, instead, my favorites were usually just the ones that brought back what was good in older seasons well enough, or improved upon bits that didn't work so well in recent seasons, or just found some new life in the side characters without depending on a formula. But that's certainly not to say I didn't like them. So without further ado, from a critic first and a fan second, here they are. Number 10. Top Bolt. Now this one was the last episode I saw since they leaked the finale, and I already had a full list of favorites, but it just managed to snag the number 10 spot on the strength of one character. Yeah, I guess it's just an okay episode for Twilight and Rainbow playing personal trainers for the two actual stars, and you could argue that this problem shouldn't have gone unnoticed before they stepped in, but even so, it is a fantastic portrayal of the kind of person who cares so much about helping those close to them that they forget their own needs matter too, i.e. Vapor Trail. Just about everything they did with her here was both lovable and interesting. Just working the characters around her into her story elevated them. Like Rainbow Dash pointing out when she hears Vapor say something nice about herself for the first time. Absolutely perfect moment. Even her best friend Sky Stinger, who spent most of the story as just a flat sort of caricature of a narcissist, seemed like he had a worthwhile part to play with her. Because to be as loyal and caring towards her as he was, he would have to appreciate what she does for him on some level, making it believable that she cares so much about helping him, and that their friendship has lasted this long. It occurred to me while I was writing this that this episode partly fits the formula I was talking about in the intro. True, it's not about gratitude because it's portrayed as Rainbow and Twilight just doing their duty, as per usual, and it's not about wish fulfillment because they're fixing something that's gone wrong between the two friends, not really making a dream that's out of reach come true. But where it does fit, it partly corrects the formula. It understands that the setup hinges on us really getting to know the new character, not just on telling us a couple of their traits, and showing us how the thing they want is so important to them. And it understands that the payoff hinges on following their story, not just their fantasy, all the way to where we see how and why the solution gives them what they really need. Add in a nice training montage, and an increasingly rare moment with Twilight being a legitimately insightful leader, and this one more than earns its spot here, flawed though it is. Number 9. Pony Point of View. Okay, the criticism I hear the most towards this episode is that the twist at the end came out of nowhere, instead of ending it by working out who was really at fault for what and how it led to the disaster in question. And fair warning, that's the last time we're avoiding spoilers, at all. But anyway, as far as I'm concerned, that is a perfect microcosm of everything that this one did right. This episode was a throwback to the golden days when the way you would expect a story or a moral to fall into place didn't necessarily determine how it did so. Instead, it was determined by what made sense for characters with these personalities to do in each situation, and what would be the most fun with the creative possibilities this world offers. So instead of bending and twisting the protagonists into whatever they needed to be to fit inside a box, as per formula, it felt like a story that could only come from them, their own personal experience to share with us. And that's what this episode brought to the table. It's just Pinkie Pie, Rarity, and Applejack giving us their side of the story on their cruise being ruined. And it's honestly kind of delightful. We get to see how they view each other, especially when their personalities clash in hilarious ways, and how their memories differ on who was in the wrong and when. Each story actually tells us just as much about the one telling it as it does the other two. It would have taken some of the fun out if the episode had worked through what actually happened for us, because you can do a lot of that yourself based just on what you know about these three and what makes sense if you look closely. But, like the older episodes, it still doesn't forget what it is at the core of the problem that these three need to learn, even if it doesn't get them there in a typical way. And for that, as usual, it comes across as an even better, more relatable moral because it doesn't hinge on someone saying the semantically perfect thing right when the time comes, as morals in real life usually don't. It hinges on something they didn't expect, making them all realize, like the rational characters they are, that they're all just holding a grudge, and putting more of a negative slant on each other's actions than any of them deserve. Sometimes, even if someone hurts your feelings in a conflict, that doesn't mean the right thing to do is nail them to the floor for it. Sometimes you just have to agree that it was one of those random bum-yups. Talk it out like the friends you are and let it pass. So yeah, maybe there's no one quality that it pushed above and beyond, but it was a lovable good time from start to finish, in the way I'm really starting to miss these days. Number 8. On Your Marks. Now this one it seems I actually have to go out of my way to defend. There's a significant portion of people who really go after Applebloom in this one for how overdramatic she is when the Crusaders decide to go their separate ways for an afternoon. She can't think of anything to do on her own? Really? Then all Scootaloo has to do is point out that, oh yeah, they didn't mean going their separate ways forever? Well, I do agree. In fact, to the point where I think this episode knows darn well it's overdramatic on Applebloom's part. We've seen it before from her in Bloom and Gloom, worrying about their group dynamic being shaken up. It's rooted in her very first CMC episode, where she suddenly gained a group of friends she could cling to for a positive identity. It's not like the episode tried to pretend that this was an oh-so-difficult thing, and it warranted the Crusaders taking the whole episode to learn that they'll always be friends oh-so-dramatically. Though I have to wonder how many fans would have eaten it up if it had. But no, it's just a little bit of insecurity on Applebloom's part. And this is the perfect time to bring that up because they are sort of at a crossroad. They'll have to talk about what they want now and what their options are. And not only does the episode address that, it takes advantage of it to lay out a new direction and new character arcs for them. Ones that don't just revolve around them being these awesome prodigies whose lives are all walking on sunshine from now on. They think about new things to branch out and try, which don't necessarily include each other. They look into what their newfound purpose actually entails, and they figure out how to get comfortable with it. There are moments where it seems just a little disjointed, but every point is relevant and comes together soon enough. Plus, not only does Dave Polsky show that he really has a grasp on these characters after writing them for 5 seasons, he throws in a lot of his trademark humor.
We need to go try new stuff like we used to! Like square dancing! Or mountain climbing! Or square dancing on the mountain we just climbed!
And at the center of it all is Applebloom, no longer the face of wanting to get a cutie mark so the show can finally expand on her traits and grow her a little. Which is good, because she still has a lot of growing up to do. Not only has she never really found her own thing like the other two, but like I said before, you could argue she's been clinging to them a bit, or at least to the idea of having a club full of friends. Now she has to gain a more mature perspective on friendship before she can fix the problem she finds. In fact, she's actually starting to remind me of Twilight. The resolution it builds to, with her and the other two taking possession of their new roles to help Tender Taps the Dancer, is very sweet and well played, especially since Apple Bloom knows exactly how bad it feels to bomb on stage. Add to that their resolution to keep trying new things and growing into this bit by bit, which we may have rushed over in a later episode, and On Your Marks was that rare thing in Season 6. An episode that cared about the long-term story arcs of its characters. And also the best Cutie Mark Crusaders episode of the season. By far. Yeah, I'm still on that. You want to fight some more? Come on. Number 7. The Saddle Row Review. Now this episode was just a lot of fun with the gang in its offbeat style. And it really wasn't meant to be a whole lot more than that. Like Pony Point of View, it just sets about showing us how everyone plays off each other in this scenario, this time in a way that's even more offbeat and creative. It really goes for just a slice of life, being sure to show us everyone's petty moments as well as their sweet ones, having some things work out by being approximately good enough instead of sliding perfectly into place, all very fun and relatable. Still though, the fact that several people have the episode ranked higher in hindsight only held me up for a moment. I mean, I never really went head over heels for it or anything. In fact, what didn't help first thinking back was that I couldn't actually remember much about it. I remember Sweep, 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 because nobody lets me forget. I remember a spoon pony. I remember something about a good and evil rarity on Pinky's shoulder. Oh, and apparently there's a guy named Stinky Bottom running a hat shop. Watching it again, it's as much fun, well-woven silliness as I remembered, but that's not the same as being downright hilarious or anything. Some of the humor is actually pretty cheesy.
I don't know the first thing about clothes. Pretty much all I can do is look at something and tell you if it's clothes or not. This chair? Not clothes.
It does try to weave in some morals along the way, but that gets a bit ham-fisted too at points, so if anything, I actually thought I should drop it a place. It was so close with On Your Marks that in the end I just decided to stick with my original placement. Still, it manages to have fun with the entire main 6, and there are some little moments that are actually kinda brilliant. And that's pretty good for the writer who brought us...
This not yet snow!
Seriously?
Number 6. Every Little Thing She Does. Probably no aspect of this season was more polarizing than Starlight Glimmer. And for my part, I do agree that making her the season arc was an underdeveloped idea that was left stagnant and front and center for long stretches on end. But as far as how good the episodes themselves were, they wasted no time in finding ways to make her a unique presence, even in spots where the episodes were otherwise lacking. She gravitates towards other outsiders. She's sensitive, but only so sweet or modest, and she can only be so ashamed before she finds something to work her confidence back up, maybe even to the point of getting carried away. And of course, she's one sly, crafty little schemer. Her episodes didn't really even try to build much of an escalating arc where she was concerned. They just kept painting the picture of what kind of character Starlight is. And everything I listed before was laid out fairly well in no second prances, granted, but every little thing she does just took it up a level. It's here we see her starting to gain confidence again through making progress on her training and sheer magical skill, which was nice to see because that was supposed to be a big part of Twilight's interest in her. And the confidence is well founded because these scenes do a fantastic job demonstrating what a virtuoso she is. The visuals are innovative to be sure, but so are the concepts, stacking one spell on top of another one to get a combination effect, thus opening up a whole slew of possibilities for the creative mind. It really sets this up as something Starlight could just bury herself in. Which she sort of ends up trying to do when she realizes how much more comfortable she is handling that than she is getting up close and personal with someone, trying to enjoy a simple activity on their terms. That's a very realistic depiction of someone trying to compensate, especially after gaining momentum as Twilight's hotshot student. Some of the stuff she says here even had people wondering if she might be more than just antisocial and actually have some sort of condition. And granted, if fan reactions to suggestions that Mod Pie has Asperger's were any indication, there are many who would be horrified at the thought of people trying to force some real-world issue like that on one of their characters. But regardless, it is relevant that some of Starlight's behavior is comparable to something like that. So whether it was intentional or not, it does make her a good representation of people who are different in ways like that. And it's also a good depiction of how a little patience and understanding can be just what it takes to work through issues like this, which pretty much all friends need to remember at some point. Yeah, I guess it did let the hijinks carry the show sometimes, but with a resolution that was both understated and thoughtful, if a little sugary, this episode doesn't cop out on its story. And to think I doubted the team's ability to make Starlight interesting. They always do that with villains they do a terrible job reforming. And the ones they do an okay job reforming, and the ones they do a pretty good job reforming, and gee, no wonder they like doing that so much. And yeah, they'd better be able to do something good with Starlight if they're going to make her the season arc and push the main six off to the side like they did. I mean, who else would they get a good story out of? Actually, about that. Number 5. Dungeons and Discords. Okay, so Spike, Discord, and Big Mac are all stuck together playing ogres, and yeah, it's already interesting. To be fair, though, it's always possible to screw up a premise. The writing still has to deliver. And yeah, this episode totally does. The setup with Discord and Fluttershy is good, conveying two thinking characters with lots of personality behind what they do. The Discord moments are good, providing lots of creative, silly fun. And the story between the three leads is pretty good, providing a strong, believable dynamic that says a lot about all three. But especially Discord. There's a pretty legitimate character arc on humility here, and not dismissing someone's worth just because of status. There's a lot you can get out of different friendships. And the writer who pulled it off... Wow, look at you, Mr. Confaloni, going from one of the worst episodes of the series to the point where you're a genuine asset and saving grace to this season. I feel like I'm really starting to appreciate your work and hope you come back for the next go-around. And... well, I must be really rusty at this whole being nice thing. Well, I guess I could at least make sure I'm pronouncing your name right. The only thing really wrong with this episode, and the reason it's not ranked higher, is that it starts to really shuffle its feet on getting to the main portion, as other reviewers have pointed out, that being the game brought to life. It's the main course of action that the narrative rests on, not to mention the most interesting part, but they only actually spend about 2.5 minutes on it. There's nothing that happens after Discord gets sick of the game the first time that couldn't have been accomplished there. Instead, they have him teleport them to a lounge and just rattle off a list of things he already told us he'd rather do in 2 separate scenes before that. They could have just as well had Discord try to show them he's more fun and has better ideas by bringing the game to life, which would have added a second act rising action portion to that and fleshed it out into its own complete adventure. Okay, I know that for people who have already seen this episode and liked it just fine, it's hard to get behind the notion of changing something you didn't really have a problem with. But just humor me here for a second. If they'd done it my way and made the game brought to life the part where most of the character arc took place, then just ended it the same way by having him set the Squizzard thing on them when they object to how he's running it, would anyone have said, you know what? No. What this needed was a minute set aside for Discord to take them to one of the places they already established they didn't want to go to, so they could do nothing in particular, say nothing in particular, and just sort of keep repeating that they don't want to do these things. Number 4. Viva Las Pegas. Okay, now we finally reached the A material. There wasn't as much, but no, I'd still never deny that this season had its great ones. But a lot of you might be surprised that I'm putting this of all episodes in that class. And at first, I wasn't sure myself. This was one of those offhand conflicts, it is a Cutie Map episode after all, that makes for a good story without pushing anything in particular over the top. Usually with this type of thing, I give it its due and point out its 1 or 2 faltering points, which most episodes have, as possible ways it could have been great when it wasn't. Except this time, those points just never came. Instead, it just kept revealing its intelligence as its plot unfolded. It does a pretty decent job showing us how everything works at this resort and painting a picture of how the main villain sets himself up as that supportive friend who's so nice, you don't even realize it's an abusive relationship. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. The way it plays the mystery just subtly enough to keep you guessing, how every part of Flim and Flam's revenge, including their reconciliation, is well set up, well thought out, and actually makes them come across as pretty darn clever, how it ties both Fluttershy and Applejack's perspectives in so well, I could go on. Fluttershy, for one, puts her newfound confidence to good use, being kind and sympathetic, yes, but also holding her ground and even going into sassy shy mode once or twice, so she comes across as thoughtful rather than wishful. But even so, it's steady, authoritative Applejack who comes across as the stronger presence. Thank goodness they didn't go the route of just teaching her to go out of your way to help no matter who it is. Or worse, that she should just get over whatever Flim and Flam did to her and believe in their goodness like a good main hero. Because, no, she shouldn't. You don't put important time and resources into helping people who have demonstrated they're willing to hurt you and those you care about for their own gain. That's not fair to you or your loved ones. If you have a good reason to think it really would help, that's another matter, but Applejack didn't. And it turned out she was right to trust her instincts. Their feud wasn't the real problem there. She still helped them when she did see a reason to believe that good could come from it, and tried to make amends with them while she was at it. They just decided to pass on that, as people like them sometimes do. So it teaches both good nature and realism.
See what I mean? That's just so darn smart.
But as interesting as it is on a story level, that's not to say it neglects sheer fun. At all. The humor, the visuals, and Vegas atmosphere it works so hard to create... Gladmane, Seriously, they made an Elvis pony. That is frigging fantastic. Consider on top of it all how the map episodes were starting to fall into an easy formula, and Viva Las Pegasus was that really rare thing in Season 6. An episode that overachieved. Number 3. The Gift of Mod Pie. As someone who really wants to show exactly why he did or didn't like something, even to the point where I'm prone to stretching my limits as a critic, deciding just what to say can be complicated. But this time it was easy. I liked this episode because it took 3 of the most fun, eccentric characters in the show and played them perfectly off each other. We have Pinky and Maud, 2 sisters who just are what they are, that being polar opposites of self-expression, yet totally get one another, and the episode does a great job showing us one more thing they share, which would be entertaining enough just for the sight of no emotion hanging out with every emotion to the fullest extreme, but they actually use it for some great development on both characters. Pinkie Pie's sweet immaturity causes her to almost ruin her own day in an attempt to make Maud happy, and Maud's mature steadiness leads her to do the right thing without hesitating and make it all better. And actually, that makes for a fantastic moral about how you shouldn't have to hurt yourself to do nice things for your loved ones, especially since the show has faltered on that one in the past. They shouldn't want it to come to that if they have their heads on straight. And then there's also Rarity, who serves as sort of an accent mark for this episode. The story involves miscommunication, so they needed someone for each sister to play off of, and they seriously couldn't have picked anyone better. We've seen before that Rarity's helpful, and she'll make a genuine effort to understand and keep up if she's not offended, but her own quirks might start to show through.
You're supposed to be all, oh, I'm so excited I got the rock pouch! And I know I say excited a lot when I'm actually just kind of excited, but this time I'm really excited about how excited I am about being this excited over the rock pouch!
And that gets particularly interesting with Maud, who Rarity is really growing to understand by this point. Much like we are. She can tell when Maud means business, she's moved when she deadpans something heartfelt, she plays off of her to help take down the con artist pony. Which is awesome, by the way. I mean, this whole thing could have fallen apart if it didn't seem right in keeping with what these characters would do. But instead, if you can just get past the sequence with Pinkie Pie running the same joke into the ground about building up Maud's gift, it's a hysterical, genuine, personality-filled episode that would have been a joy in any season. And easily my vote for the most underrated episode in this one. Number 2. To Where and Back Again. Now, I did review this one recently, and as a 2-part episode, there are probably more details than are worth just reiterating here. But in a nutshell, for me, this was a return to form for the 2-parters. And how's that for something I never expected to get from Season 6? Yes, it has its parts that were rushed or glossed over, as even some of my favorites do, but it did what I always thought these 2-parters should be able to do with their extra runtime and resources. 1. Create an exciting adventure. 2. Get us invested in the main characters and the struggles they face in this adventure. 3. Don't cop out. And if that sounds too simple, consider how many of the others have managed to mess that up. The crystalling wasn't exciting. Its way of building up the tension in its conflict was to show Luna and Celestia blasting storm clouds every so often, and just sort of try to make it seem like they could only do it so much longer. The Crystal Empire and the Cutie Remark were more exciting, but there wasn't much to be emotionally invested in where the characters were concerned. The former treated the whole thing like taking a test, with each new obstacle as just another puzzle for Twilight to pick the correct answer to, and the latter like a gumball machine for colorful new fan service conflicts to chew on for a minute, and then just spit back out. Even the Cutie map, which was both exciting and involving in many ways, still kinda copped out by giving us an easy shortcut to defeating Starlight relatively early in the conflict, turning the rest of the episode into mostly just a struggle to wipe makeup off her flank at the right time. But this episode digs into whatever character and plot threads it has left to get excited about, and just runs with them. Starlight Glimmer reaching a crossroad on whether she can finally trust herself again, Trixie completing her switch from adorable heel to heroic miscreant and friend, the Changelings returning and providing a couple new adventure conflicts that were still on the table with them, Discord playing the Joker in the deck matched well against another Joker, Chrysalis's Power Sponging Stone. Yeah, it all really helps us get into this story. A couple contrivances aside, it's all structured very well and very intelligently, and it's filled with great character interplay that makes almost every moment with our motley crew a joy. Admittedly, I have gotten into other conflicts from the show more, but in that we're just talking about the difference between a great and an all-time great. Number 1. Stranger Than Fanfiction. No matter how bored I get, it seems like Rainbow Dash keeps finding ways to do this to me. One of the 2 writers on this one is the same guy who wrote Spice Up Your Life, but somehow this episode manages to do everything right that one did wrong. I don't know, maybe he thought Spice Up Your Life would be his lesson on critics, and Stranger Than Fanfiction would be his stance on critical fans, but in any case, this one is a better take on both. And granted, it does lean towards making fun of being overly critical, but there is merit in that too. Because yes, there is such a thing as outsmarting yourself and forcing an unwarranted complaint onto a story. And the bit where our fanbase proxy Quibblepants accuses the actual Caballeron of doing a terrible accent is one of many times that this episode is absolutely hilarious. But it also establishes that he does say this because he cares and he is observant. Some people said lines like this made him sound like just an anal retentive wannabe critic.
The first series was smart and cool and an amazing nod to old-time serialized adventure books that somehow manages to be self-reflexive and ironic while at the same time celebrating the art form without a hint of cynicism.
But actually, that's almost exactly what Roger Ebert said about the first Superman movie, including when he used it as a point of comparison to criticize the Supergirl movie. It's just that Ebert knew how to be entertaining and engaging when he wrote. This guy is not a professional, so it's believable that he's too condescending and incessant. Though professionals aren't immune to that either. But fan or critic, that's not to say there's no merit in what he says. Not only does he make a lot of valid points, his alternate perspective actually proves pretty useful to Daring Do a couple times, even though she's the one who's able to do this on a regular basis. Now, on the agreement he comes to with Rainbow Dash at the end, I have heard the objection that just because two different stories have two different appeals does not mean they're equally good, especially when we're talking about a series that switched from one appeal to another. Well, that's true, and there is some value in debating which story is crafted better. It allows you to think about your own outlook and build on it for the future. But there is a point at which you have to be able to accept that your perspectives are just different, and for one reason or another that they're going to stay that way. Because no matter how good or high profile a critic you think you are, it's going to happen. And it's going to happen with critics who can make just as high a claim, if not higher. For better and for worse, all perspectives differ in some way, and it's not always something that can be changed. It's like the philosophies on how reality itself is a little bit different to every single person. So yes, you do need to be able to just shake hands sometimes, at least with each other. But heck, I've said plenty of times that just having a great message doesn't make a story, so don't just love this episode for that. Rainbow Dash and Quibble are perfect together. Watching them go fan pony at the convention with each other is both adorable and full of personality. And watching them argue is actually pretty fun too. I think a lot of people saw this as a way in which they don't go together, but notice that Rainbow never really gets mad at him because he won't shut up. It's because he doesn't agree with her. She actually keeps listening to this and trying to think of ways to counter him. And even if they do start to run his shtick into the ground by the end, up to that point it works on just about every level, providing the most laughs I had all season. Add in some fun settings, clever plotting, and an overall affectionate outlook on its topic, and you have the best episode of Season 6. And thank goodness for that, because I don't know if I could have gotten through this season without it. I mean, talk about a small reward. You know what? I'm not even going to go back to my old ways after this. I'm going to speak more constructively and inclusively, and that's going to be very easy because my next project lined up is a look back at a past season. No, wait. Okay, I think I read that wrong. A look back at a past generation.